And we'll go ahead and let you take it away, Waylon.
Perfect, thanks. Yeah, so Alex, can you tell us the criteria that you use to decide whether to use an ERV or a HRV system?
Yeah, I mean that's interesting. It has a little bit to do, predominantly do with climate and a little bit with preference. Like we were talking about ERVs because they don't need drains, right? So that it is actually, rather than the function that it typically describes of humidity recovery, is really kind of a function to make equipment more affordable. But when we're talking about whole house ventilation, it really has a lot more to do with the climate, right? So the difference between the HRV, the heat recovery ventilator, and an ERV, an enthalpy recovery ventilator, is the humidity aspect. So where that matters is where we have if you have severe difference in humidity between indoor and outdoor, right? So in a desert climate, for example, but where it becomes for our climate more applicable is in really cold winters. Same thing, right? Cold winters mean low relative humidity on the outside. And that's when we really want to preserve the humidity on the inside. So an ERV like in Eastern Oregon or Eastern Washington can make a lot of sense. But in most cases, an HRV is sufficient for us in the West side.
Sure, that's great. So we had a handful of questions about the pre-filtration systems. Can you speak a little bit more about the pre-filtration system that you install?
Yeah, so really what we're getting at is that most units, most ERVs, only the filtration that they provide themselves are predominantly to protect the equipment, right? So it's a MERV 8, maybe a little bit better. So if you really want to filter some more, we have to think about additional filtration. And there's filter boxes that are available from Fantech that is specializing on filtration, or other suppliers that go up to a MERV 13. If you really want to take it another step, then you can, reusing the unit often, it's called air wash, that has like a charcoal filter in it and a VOC canister that pulls out, that's really kind of to HEPA filtration. Mm-hmm. That's another reason to talk about the Minotaur, because it has built-in HEPA filtration, so no additional filtration necessary. I think I saw a question around static pressure. Yes, we have to be careful with what we're adding in terms of resistance, but we want to balance the unit anyways, right? So we're going to come in and make up for that. And maybe you increase the ventilation, the fan power a little bit, but it will definitely be worth your while if you have like these smoke events.
Yeah, that's great. Can you speak to any resistance from the corrugated ducts that Zehnder provides, and ideal location for locating the HRV unit itself?
Yeah, so the Zehnder ducts, there's two types. One is actually has two walls, small, so it's smooth on the inside, to try to overcome that. The other one is tested, yes, it's a flexible duct, but the way it's designed, the pressure reduction or the static pressure it adds is pretty minimal. The nice thing about these systems is also that they've been sized to there's essentially two tubes or there's a tube per person, so like two tubes per bedroom, things like that. It aids also in the kind of like eyeballing the design a little bit better, which can make this more effective. Mm-hmm. But that was their approach. We had great results, even with longer runs. If it's too long of a run, then yes, we want to probably use some sheet metal to just get across the house, and then use the proprietary system for more distribution. But overall, they perform excellent for us. And there was a second part to the question, right, around the location of the HRV.
Yes, exactly.
So what we can't forget is, that what I call the ambient ducts, right? So the ducts that bring outside air in and exhaust air out, mm-hmm. That's outside air, right? So that's cold. So we want to make sure that these duct runs are as short as they can be. So ideally, we place an HRV near the exterior wall in order to keep those runs short. That would be ideal just for the energy penalty, because even if you insulate the ducts, it'll be R8 compared to whatever we have, R20 or up in the walls. So keep those ones short, place them next to the outside wall, but obviously centralized so that all the distribution is also kept as efficient as possible.
Sure. Yeah, that's excellent. So we had a couple questions about the Minutair unit. One, defining a low load home. So as you said, for that one, it's essentially, less than 1 ton heating and cooling load. And there was a question about the outside unit, which is pretty novel on that system. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, no, this is great follow-up because yes, it's all in this one box, right? So there's actually no outside unit like with a traditional heat pump or ductless heat pump, where we have an outside condenser and an interior fan unit, because we're bringing outside air in, like with an HRV. Actually, both units, both coils are in the unit. It's very compact. We're losing a little bit efficiency because it's so compact compared to like a traditional heat pump, ductless heat pump. But because it provides all these services together, it's a really good approach. But no outside unit, everything's in that box.
Yeah, that's really cool. So before we get to the next question, I want to recognize it's one. So if any of you have to go, you will get your CEU for the hour if you leave at this point, but feel free to stick around. We will continue answering some of the questions and the Q&A. So we had a question here on balancing, and do you have thoughts on measuring at the unit? Frequently, these units will have ports to measure the pressure difference on the unit, and a chart that'll tell you what airflow that pressure correlates to. What are your thoughts on measuring and commissioning a system using those ports versus at the core of the unit versus at each diffuser?
It really depends on how far you take your commissioning. I think balancing the way you describe it at the unit is, I think, the minimum you should do, because we want to make sure we don't depressurize or overly pressurize the home. A little bit pressurizing actually is our policy, or our approach is we are pressurizing ever so slightly our homes, because it kind of keeps contaminants out. But we don't want to do that overly, and we certainly don't want to overly depressurize the home. So balancing at the unit is important. But if you really take it to the step to say like, hey, we want to make sure that we get our CFM or fresh air where we want it, you end up measuring at the registers or the diffusers anyways. So maybe there's a, kind of setting it roughly, balancing it roughly at the unit, and then go around and do your diffusers. We had on the slide, we had a sheet where it shows like how we do that, right? So we have our design flow rates for each register, then we go around and measure. Mm-hmm. We see what the discrepancy is and make the adjustments as necessary. Again, this is where it's nice with some diffusers. You can adjust them right then and there, so you don't need dampers that need to be accessible, which can be really difficult to do. And with these low flow rates, again, like there's different manufacturers have them available where you can adjust them right then and there. I think it's still the best approach, but yeah, definitely the balance, and then do flow rates if possible, or if you have like a number where of diffusers where it's really important to get them right.
Sure. So rather than one or the other, you like both approaches,
right?
Yeah.
Great. Which again, like maybe talking about the units that we're installing, like some of the high-end units are self-balancing, right? So we're actually the fans, the brain of the unit is intelligent enough to balance the two fan motors already, and then you only have the second step left.
Perfect. So can you speak to makeup air dampers like you would have to install on a if you've got a range hood over 400 CFM, and what the impact the heat recovery ventilation system has on that, if any?
Yeah, so for one, I would say it really depends on, like many of these questions, it depends, right? So for one, like, is there cooking with gas? Then I definitely would make sure that, the direct exhaust is a higher CFM. But if you can, more and more people maybe go to induction cooking, which is less of a concern around combustion gases. At that point, maybe the flow rate of the range hood can be kept to like 200 and doesn't need to be that high. And at that point, your system probably can deal with this if you have it running, for half an hour a day. But if you have large units, we install makeup units as well, which is a whole nother system then at that point, right? Because you need to bring in the air, so you have probably a powered fan. You need to condition it because now you're bringing in a lot of air that doesn't go through a heat exchanger. You need to filter it because we want to, obviously, if we bring in air in and we're going through like all these steps to filter all the incoming air, we have to do that too. So now we're really introducing another system. But at that point, if you have makeup air, you are obviously balanced, right? That's why we do it. If you have high CFM range hood, because we do want to balance it. And so there can then basically both of these systems operate adjacently, right? But if you have smaller CFM hoods and no makeup air, then most HRVs will be just fine.
Sure. Yeah, and we had a couple of questions about equipment selection. One of them was asking about life breath and any experience you have with that, because they didn't see it on our slide there with HVI directory. So I can just clarify there that slide showed the HVI directory, which you can go to at hvi.org and look at these efficiency ratings for hundreds of different HRVs and ERVs. And so you'll be able to compare life breath to others. In that slide, it was had the directory ranked by the highest sensible recovery efficiency. And that was why you saw Minotaur and Zender there at the top. And that is probably part of why you tend to select those for your projects, Alex.
Yeah, I mean, but it's, we're talking about, like, hey, look for 80% and better. Other numbers you will see like at least 75% and better. And I think LifeBreath is a solid unit, but I think that's kind of where they max out in terms of efficiency. And then maybe a note too to these numbers that you see when, there's two numbers that are getting, that's the SRE, like the sensible recovery efficiency, and the ASE, right, the apparent sensible recovery. One only addresses the core, and they look typically better. The other one, SREs, I think is the important one to look at because it, it has it takes into account the leakage rate of the housing, waste heat of the fan motors. So it's the more useful number. So just if there's a lot of numbers on these sheets. I think if you're looking for one, then that's that. But do not forget efficiency. That was the other number that we had. If it's given in watt per CFM, look for 2 CFM per watt or better, because again, we want to make sure that we're not paying too much of a price for recovering that precious heat. So those are the two numbers. How much energy does it use? Because keep in mind, they're running 24/7. Even if it's 60 watts, it's running all the time. So efficiency, like core efficiency or like the sensible recovery efficiency and the energy consumption, those are the important numbers.
That's great. So we had a question about, for a larger home where you might need 100 CFM or more, and are units available with that type of capacity, or would that require multiple units?
Both is possible. I mean, we for example, like we talked about Zender before, they have a nice array of units that deliver, over 250. I think the biggest one, 250 CFM. So those would be appropriate. Or, if it's a large home, you can also zone them. Obviously, again, then you have multiple pieces of equipment you have to provide, but maybe there's a benefit in a larger home, or if you have different types of uses. But yes, there's some available. Again, we're still just seeing ventilation, heat recovery ventilation really becoming a topic. in the American market. And so hopefully there's more units that are coming online. Like we've been talking about Zender and Minitair, both are, Zender is from Europe and Minitair is from Canada. So hopefully other, local vendors will, understand how important that is to us as contractors and provide more choices so we can serve our clients of any home size.
Sure. So we had a question about, finding a quality HVAC contractor who, is qualified to do these installs. And, specifically the question was, where can I find one in Port Townsend? But I think in general, probably a lot of people are wondering in their locales where they can find a qualified contractor. Can you speak to that at all?
Like what happened that we're really familiar with this because we've been doing it for a while, and we had many trade partners who were not like quite familiar with what we were doing, which is now becomes more and more standard, like air tightness, ventilation, stuff like that. I think the key piece is, if you have a trade partner who you trust and you have a good relationship with, talk to them about it. Even if they might, hopefully they can say like, look, we haven't done these very often, or we don't know, and then bring them along, because you can really form like a long-term partnership. It's going to be an advantage for them. They're going to need to do this more and more. It's code now. Code will be increasing. Really, they're going to be ahead of the curve, and they're going to be the one getting the call. So if you can let them know, like, look, I'm looking for a partnership. I want to install these units. Let's create a relationship and let's get through this together. The first couple ones, invest that into your trade partners, and I'm sure they're going to be long-term partner.
Yeah, that's great advice. So do you have any advice for talking with, builders or developers who maybe have had a negative experience with heat recovery or whole house ventilation units, that were older technology, say 15 to 20 years old, and are resistant to trying it again?
Yeah, obviously, we know this. We've gone through this with heat pumps, right? Where people are like, I'm uncomfortable, so unfortunately, yes, if there's a new technology, there will be setbacks in the beginning, either because the equipment is not up to what we ask it to do, or the installations has been quite what we wanted to do. So there will always people who have like a bad experience. And yes, it's a uphill battle to say like, reverse that experience. But it is code. We can point to like, look, there's state agency that say like, this makes sense, let's do this, right? There's research on this. There's research on how it improves indoor air quality. And that's probably the most important, I think, to think. Like, energy efficiency sounds great and people like really appreciate it. But if you really talk about health, of your family and like improving that, most people really are responsive to that. And so hopefully, between that and talking educated about what you're really trying to do, you're not trying to upsell them, like you're genuinely interested in their well-being. I think people are responsive to that, but some might not. And then, you're just going to have to do your best. And if it's not receptive, then, maybe next time.
Sure. So a couple other questions on the Minitair. One, how loud is it? And the other was, can you explain that backup heater that you mentioned there?
So Minitair, because they're a small company out of Quebec, Canada, everybody was concerned, like, what if it fails? What if the company fails, right? And in 10 years, we installed like dozens of these and the company's gone away. So they're making the point of saying like, look, all these components we have in there, the fans, the compressors, all these are off the shelf, high quality products, right? So we're having the compressors in there come really out of the refrigeration industry. So, and that's kind of a good, it's kind of like a refrigerator. And so it really is like, as long as it has a dedicated space, no concerns at all in terms of noise. And the backup heater is just a resistance, inline duct heater, essentially, that, the only thing is it has to be able to be controlled by the Minitair. So the Minitair essentially is saying, hey, it's too cold. I'm not meeting my set point anymore. Hey, please kick in, and sends a signal to the duct heater that then kind of, it's a post heater. So it does the last little couple degrees to make sure that the air entering the room is not too cold and provides the amount of heating that's necessary. So it's a very standard device, duct heater, really nothing very solid technology. And we know resistance, electric resistance is not as efficient as heat pump, but because of the combination, we get the best of both worlds. We get the reliability and the capacity of the resistance electric. And on the other hand, we get most of the year, we get the efficiency of the heat pumps. So it's a great combo.
That's great. Now, do you have a problem ever marketing this to your homeowners or your customers as a technology or an upsell to some degree?
I think there's, once we explain the function of the system, there's never a question around whether there's what the benefits are, right? So that's quickly understood. Like, okay, I understand indoor air quality, or I get a sense of what that is. So it becomes a question around cost, right? And so we're just trying to explain that it's a long-term investment in your well-being, and most people see the benefit. It's just having these conversations, around what the goals are. What's probably important, I think, what you mentioned earlier, that some of the other systems that are not balanced or that are integrated into other systems are hard to maintain. And again, this is where I recommend if you have an HRV to really place it somewhere where it's easy to access, because the homeowners will change the filters and check on it now and then. So don't put it too far away where it gets forgotten. But if once it's there, introduce them to the system. Say like, here's how you use it. Very simple. Change your filters every 3 to 6 months, and they're gonna love it. And I think most of our clients, they really appreciate. Like maybe this anecdote that I can talk about is when we talk about it in conjunction with airtightness. Most we're saying like, hey, we're building airtight to make the building more efficient, and they're like, well, but I want to open my windows, or like, am I going to suffocate? I'm like, you can open your windows, but what we're finding is if you have an HRV, a comfortable balanced ventilation, no windows open. Nobody needs to open a window because it's not stuffy, right? People are comfortable, and at least after that, like spent the first couple of nights in the home, and they're saying like, many say like, I've never slept this well, because it's essentially sleeping like with an open window, just you get it conditioned and it's comfortable, and no noise. And it's just, people really enjoy it. So I think it can be a little bit of an uphill in the beginning. People don't understand like, why do they need another piece of equipment? But I think the benefits become apparent really quickly.
Sure. So, bringing up that point of locating the unit, do you have any good kind of tips for smaller homes where, it might be a little bit bigger than, as far as the fresh air requirements than say a spot ERV, but, where space is really a commodity and precious, where would you locate a unit like this? Do you have any ideas there?
Yeah, I mean, you probably have a space where it can share a space with the water heater or maybe the laundry equipment, right? So like, for example, the Minutair, depending on ceiling height, it just fits over like a washer dryer combo. It gets a little, like, again, you have to be creative about it, but the units can be, if designed properly. I mean, you showed in your slide the very simple design. It was like in the closet, right?
Sure. Yeah.
Be a little creative about it, and that's where it's important to, in the beginning, pick your equipment, like, what do you need in terms of ventilation rate? What do you want in terms of efficiency? Pick your equipment and then go and say like, okay, where does it fit, right? And then maybe you have a closet that grows a little bit, but you can use it for something else as well besides housing that equipment.
Sure.
But that's how I would approach it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I absolutely agree. I think a closet, using some of that ceiling space, especially in those underused or utility laundry type rooms, that's really your best bet there. Well, that's a wrap pretty much on our questions here. If anybody else has any, feel free to throw them in the Q&A. And otherwise, I really appreciate your time here, Alex. This was a great discussion, and I'm really glad that you're able to share a lot of the insights that you've gained here along the years of installing these systems.
Yeah, I mean, I can only say there's going to be a learning curve in the beginning, but it's very worthwhile. Like our clients are happy in their homes, and they recommend us. And I think this is going to be key with this new ventilation requirements. If you install systems that people don't like, they're not going to trust them, and we're going to have more callbacks. So I would encourage everybody to consider like these dedicated system as an approach and as a benefit to their homes, to saying like these are exceptionally comfortable and healthy, as opposed to try to kind of just make do to meet the code and then probably in the end having more problems than you think. So consider these systems. They work awesome if you like follow these 4 steps that we talked about. In the beginning, really plan on it. I think you set up for success.
Yeah, absolutely. Speaking to the importance of planning, we recently saw a Zender installed by another builder in the garage, which is unconditioned space here by code. And of course, that's not allowed by Zender, and that's going to create some comfort issues. And so, what they had to do then was install a couple of mini splits in the garage to make it a conditioned space. So, that just speaks to the importance of that forethought there, and really that planning to make sure that you're not having to go and do things and work backwards at that point to make up for mistakes.
Good.
And again, the resources you pointed out, like DTO, they can help you with your first couple of systems.
Absolutely.
Perfect. Thank you, everyone, for joining us.